The essence of editorial illustration is visual commentary. Its principal function is to be symbolic with journalism contained within the pages of newspapers and magazines.
Editorial illustration is artwork designed to accompany published articles and media. It accompanies the written content found within magazines and newspapers and takes many forms. Political cartoons satirise current affairs, providing a visual commentary to events in society. Reportage brings an artistic perspective to journalism. Editorial illustrations can describe and interpret articles, clarifying meaning and depicting complex ideas in a visual accessible way. The opportunities presented by current affairs allow it to react quickly to the real world, giving it a unique position in the world of illustration. It is also perhaps the most wide-ranging subject for illustration, as Alan Mail says.
The potential for its use and breadth of application is vast. The media industry is extremely diverse, covering a myriad of themes and topics. Daily, weekly, monthly, periodical editions catering for general, specific and niche markets.
Looking back, a tradition of illustrated commentary has always existed. The Fight Between Carnival and Lent by 16th century painter Bruegel shows a struggle between two lifestyles, chaotic peasant festivals and the strict rules of religion. Hogarth's Gin Lane records 18th century drunkenness in London, blaming gin for an increase in violence and carelessness, as a plastered mother drops her child and a violent mob rounds the corner. But it wasn't until the industrial era that editorial illustration flourished. Revolutionary new printing processes allowed the mass printing of text and images quickly and cheaply. The age of the newspaper had arrived. The tradition of political satire was embodied by publications like Punch, which featured large doses of scathing wit and scorn. Most of society, including those unfortunate enough to be illiterate, could easily understand pamphlets and newsletters featuring illustration. With photography yet to assume the importance it does today, illustration was the largest source of visual communication in the media. Later on in the 20th century, editorial illustration entered a golden era. The amount of specialised magazines and publications exploded. Popular illustrators like Albert Dawn produced covers for the most famous magazines, and artists like Norman Rockwell left their mark on American society, creating a body of commercial illustrations still celebrated today. For his first covers, Norman Rockwell was paid in modern equivalent of thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, thousands of other illustrators earned a living off mid-level publications, producing art for a culture with a gargantuan appetite for illustration. However, this was not always going to be. Technological progress, which had given birth to the editorial illustration boom, also gave birth to another visual medium, photography. Editorial illustration had been the main way of depicting current affairs and events. However, photography slowly took control of the market. Its unbeatable accuracy and lesser technical requirements posed a serious threat to editorial illustration. Nonetheless, it is able to depict ideas and concepts in a way that a camera simply can't, like quantum theory in The New Scientist, or the satirical representation of an unpopular political figure. Editorial illustration is able to bring an artistic and expressive level of imagery to publication in a way which photography is often unsuited to. The markets for editorial illustration may have changed with the arrival of photography, but the way it is commissioned has remained more stable. The art director of a publication will usually be told by the editor to provide imagery for an article, and they will then contact a freelancer or an agent. Publishers will normally stick with the artist who they have worked with before. As Mark Potter, creative director of The Guardian, says,
editorial publishers often have a select group of illustrators whom they used before and trust to meet deadlines, or they select agents whom they trust. On a newspaper, it's important to have a group who can handle the deadlines and assessments.
Despite this, publishers will sometimes take a chance on a new illustrator. Work often has a fast turnover and tight deadlines, so a regular illustrator may be unavailable, or a new style may be required for a new regular column. So many illustrators receive their first commission from the editorial business. As a portfolio consultant for the AOI, Fig Taylor says,
the editorial sector tends to be the one that provides most illustrators with their first commissions.
Alongside these first commissions and every other one that hopefully happens afterwards is a contract. A contract has three key elements: an offer, a consideration, generally money, and an acceptance. When all these are in place, then a binding contract is created and work can begin. The consideration of a contract is usually the fee for the commission, intended to be exchanged for an offer. Contracts don't always have to be in a written format, and initially are not when it comes to fast-paced editorial work. Art directors will make and accept offers by the phone. If this sounds complicated, there is a way for an illustrator to avoid the whole process, namely by being represented by an agent who will sort it all out for you. Otherwise, negotiating fees is something any freelancer will have to do if they want to earn a living. Unfortunately, the fees offered by such commissions are often unattractively small. The Guardian freely displays its prices on its website, which is nice, but the numbers are not exactly impressive. The smallest fee is little over £100. During a visit to AECB, the illustrator Adam Simpson bluntly said that,
"You don't really get paid much for editorial work."
While Lisa Asato, a regular contributor of editorial illustration to one of Norway's biggest papers, said that,
I primarily earn my bread on my children book illustrations, and I can't see how I'm supposed to be able to make my living on editorial illustrations only.
fees can be swayed by a number of factors. Simon Stern states the biggest differences are caused by variations in the publication's circulation.
For instance, a quarter-page illustration might fetch as little as £150 in a low-circulation magazine, but around £2,000 if it were used for a national newspaper campaign.
Other factors include the intended use of the image, the type of license a client has brought, the illustrator's reputation, and how much work is actually involved in creating the image. A tighter deadline than usual or a client's shrinking budget can also affect the commission price. Unfortunately, lower offers may be given to students or inexperienced illustrators, but if the client is happy with the work, they will hopefully return to you with more work in the future. Or not. In spite of that, the sector remains appealing to a large number of illustrators. The topics are varied and interesting, and the exposure is often worthwhile. Asato described how she first got her first editorial commission to us via email.
I got my first editorial commission after I presented myself and my artwork to several newspapers. Dagbladet enjoyed them quite a lot, but didn't find any usage for them. Nevertheless, they asked if I wanted to illustrate a weekly column. The writer had just been commissioned, but the newspaper didn't have enough illustrators. Essentially, I was at the right place at the right time.
James Majowski, an AECB alumni, now working in editorial, also gave us some tips for anyone interested in joining the editorial business.
Work hard and be nice to people. Base yourself in London and go meet art directors. Be down to earth. Strive for great ideas. Think about what designers want to see and how they need to work. Self-initiated projects and plenty of promo are essential. Don't miss deadlines. Sort out the financial business side. Registering as a self-employed. Keeping proper accounts. Filing tax returns. Don't forget, it's a business.
Contracts aside, Adam Simpson kindly outlined the process involved in creating his work for us, from start to finish.
Normally, I receive an email asking if I'm available/interested in the commission. I'd read the article, reply saying yes or no. If yes, I work out my sketch. Normally one sketch, but they could ask for a few different options. I'd then email it to them and receive their feedback. Most of the time, the feedback is straightforward, but a few tweaks here and there. Then I send the final artwork. The process is normally more straightforward for editorial clients because the deadlines are closer.
Lawrence Egan, who's published several books on the subject of illustration, also wrote the following.
For illustrators working on editorial jobs, the first stage of creating visuals must come quickly. Ideas need to be visualised through sketching, mapping, doodling and drawing. A great idea only works if it communicates well, and the visual stage is the first real test of a concept and its validity. Building time into a project to allow for a rejection at the concept visual stage is paramount. Not all projects go according to the wishes of the illustrator. It's important to create more than one idea at initial stage. Creating just one concept always runs the risk of the project falling apart.
Modern commissioners of editorial illustration include newspapers like The Guardian, The Times, and magazines like The New Scientist and The National Geographic. All of these publications regularly require editorial illustration. It's important to note, however, that different publications require different things from illustrators. There is a big gap between work that is decorative and work that is commissioned for the critical visual commentary of an artist. Political cartoons are a great example of this second type. In these, the value and meaning of the image is created by the artist's ideas and opinion, which are shown in the image. On the other hand, a purely decorative piece of work requires no critical reflection from the illustrator. Robin Ellie, a commercial illustrator, says that most commissions sit somewhere between the two.
It's both. The best concept would still be a failure if the illustration itself wasn't interesting, attractive, or compelling in some way. Typically, we are not asked to comment on an issue unless you are a regular contributor who is actually specifically being paid to comment. The vast majority of editorial illustration is about elaborating on the accompanying article. Often, people just look at the illustrations and therefore assume that the illustrator is politically inclined one way or the other. But most likely he or she is just expanding on what the article talks about.
Private Eye often features illustrations with original political commentary, continuing the tradition started by publications like Punch. Its pages are stuffed with cartoons created by Private Eye's regular contributors and from whom no public figure is safe. For example, the regular Private Eye column Dave Snooty and His New Pals takes a similar form to a long-running Beano comic strip, Lord Snooty and His Pals. Lord Marmaduke, just a normal boy who happens to be an earl, has been replaced with David Cameron. In this particular strip, Cameron is seen beating Andrew Mitchell, the Conservative Chief Whip. Mitchell had recently gone off on one in front of some police officers outside Downing Street, swearing at them and calling them plebs and fuckers, amongst other things. This sort of thing does not make for good press. In Private Eye, the meaning and the context of the idea was set by the illustration itself. Its value lay in its humour created by the artist, rather than its utility as a piece of visual decoration. In publications like Private Eye, where original commentary is desired, illustrators have to reflect the editorial policy of a publication. Left-wing newspapers, such as The Guardian, will expect to be provided with imagery that complements their ideological stance. The same is also true for right-wing publications, such as The Times or The Economist. There are other issues to be wary of in the editorial business beside ideologies, low fees and swooshing deadlines. As part of the free press, illustrators must follow various ethical press codes and regulations. Editorial issues often follow, and some publications are more willing to publish provocative content than others. One of the most important examples of this regarding editorial illustration was the publication of several cartoons in Denmark depicting the Islamic prophet Muhammad. According to Islamic religious regulation, this is a grave sin, and strong reactions from the Muslim world followed. Several mass riots and protests took place in the Muslim community, ultimately responsible for deaths of over 100 people. Diplomatic embassies were set on fire and in Pakistan bombed. Numerous threats were issued at newspapers, governments and anyone else associated with the blasphemous cartoon. A debate was sparked regarding the press and the extent to which it should be given free rein. As a counter-reaction, Seattle cartoonist Molly Norris urged artists to arrange a Draw Muhammad Day. This was not done with the objective of causing disrespect. Instead, it was a protest designed to exercise the right to draw anything and inspire the protection of this right. David Apatow, a writer of the history of illustration, summed up the relevance of these events nicely.
In the last few years, there have been several incidents where drawings of the Prophet, Muhammad, have upset the balance of international relations, inspiring wild mobs to riot, kill, invade, and burn down embassies. Cartoonists may not be paid the way investment bankers are. They don't get preferential treatment in fancy restaurants the way movie stars do, or command armies the way political leaders do. They mostly dress like slobs, but in their ability to make a line on paper, they still have the means to shake up the world.
Digital technology has also changed editorial illustration. Deadlines may have been slightly extended, and physical copies of the work no longer need to be delivered. On the other hand, it's not clear if time saved has actually been passed on to the illustrator. Not likely in the time-starved publishing world. Illustrators now also compete in a global market. Geographic distance no longer sets you apart from everyone else. The quantity of artwork received and viewed by an art director is also larger, so it's harder for any individual illustrator to stand out. Just as importantly, technology lets illustrators work in new and quicker ways. Programs such as Photoshop allow illustrators to create, edit, and manipulate images effectively and at speed. As well as affecting the way illustrators work, technology has influenced the amount of work they receive. Editorial illustration has suffered hand in hand with the decline in traditionally published media. The fall in the sales of newspapers and other print media as a result of the internet has led to a drop in commissioned editorial illustration, for print at the very least. Senior lecturer at AUCB, Sharon Beeden, has also stated that the fees earned for editorial illustration has not risen with the inflation over recent history, another blow to the practice. But the industry has remained alive. Editorial work is still being commissioned with some regularity, and there remains the prospect of yet more editorial illustration being commissioned for the online sphere, as the traditional published industry catches up with the digital era. Thank you for listening. Is there any questions?